That's right, folks. The pants are not present. The shower is not taken, hence why I look like this. It's another offline segment, and a very necessary one because the Ukraine situation is ramping up quickly, and I wanted to talk about it. I did talk about it on my last stream, and I was going to release segments of that, but the end of that stream was me looking at nuclear warhead blast radiuses superimposed over the major American cities. So it wasn't a very productive stream, or at the very least, my energies were not focused on what's important. So I'm going to focus on what's important now, so you all know. This situation is developing very quickly. By the time this video goes out, there's probably going to be like some new news article that changes everything for the better or for the worse. But as of 9:40 a.m. Pacific time, the 24th of January, 2022, here's what we have, okay? For the past few months, Russia has been engaging in a campaign of military pressure on Ukraine, a former constituent of the USSR. They have been massing troops at the border to Ukraine, and in addition, they have moved troops into Belarus, a Russian ally, which is just north of Ukraine. I will put up a map now because that helps people understand where things are. Oh, beautiful. So here's the deal, okay? Russia has been massing forces along their border and have moved troops into Belarus. They want Ukraine. Now, here's the deal. We don't know exactly why they want Ukraine. Russia claims that, well, actually, there are a varying number of claims. Everything, it seems, from they don't want Ukraine at all, and their buildup on the border is nothing more than a response to Western aggression, to, Ukraine's flirting with NATO is an unviolable breach of trust between the two countries, to, it doesn't really matter. It could very well, given the fact that Russia is an autocracy, be a psychosis-fueled bout of egomania from Putin. It really doesn't matter. Unfortunately, diplomacy, we seem to be a bit past the point where diplomacy can prevent action. War seems almost inevitable at this point. Well over 100,000 troops have been massed. Western allies have brought troops to the borders of neighboring countries like Poland, and have also supplied Ukrainian forces with arms. Now, this is not something which is unprecedented. Russia has a long-standing history of engaging in imperialist action against neighboring former USSR countries. They invaded, of course, Georgia, Crimea. They invaded and seized themselves just a couple of years ago, and Russia has long been funding separatist militant groups in East Ukraine, this bit over here past the river, in an effort to destabilize the country and to, well, either force secession or to soften it up for invasion, which seems to be exactly the direction that things are going. There's way too much information for me to cover here. Like, this is going to be like very, very rushed, because a lot is going on. But listen, here's the deal, okay? War seems inevitable at this point. Maybe they back off. That would be really, really nice if they would back off. The U.S. has pulled its some of its people out of the embassy in Ukraine, which is a really clear indication of future conflict. Things have escalated rapidly, and based on troop movements conducted by Russia and the geopolitical consequences of their perceived aggression, at this point, it's kind of an all-or-nothing situation. Russia invades, or they wasted a lot of time and lost a lot of face. It would be very domestically bad for Russia if they backed off too, because with Putin's aggression and with the language that he's using, for him to posture like this, move troops into Belarus, and then to move away, it seems, like an overcommitment with no payoff. There are going to be a number of narratives surrounding this conflict, some of which I think are acceptable and some of which I don't. Now, let's be clear about one thing. Russia is undeniably, without question, unequivocally, the aggressor in the situation. I don't even know how that's up for contest, frankly, Russia, as is the case with like basically all authoritarian countries, has a honestly, basically all countries, has a habit of, when engaging in imperialism, justifying that imperialism through retaliatory defensive action. Okay? So, for example, Hitler posed the invasion of Poland as a defensive action. I think the USSR did as well. It's usually something like this, okay? There are two countries right next to each other, a very big imperialist one and a very small, fearful one. And then suddenly, for no reason at all, the small, fearful one, which wants to avoid war at any cost, just randomly attacks the large imperialist one. And the large imperialist one throws their arms up and they're like, well, look at what you did. Now we have no choice but to commit hundreds of thousands of soldiers to an invasion. Nice job. And of course, and Russia's done this before. We know there were was it apartment bombings that they did right before they justified the invasion of Finland, I think. During World War II, they bombed some of their own apartments. There was some, or at least there's heavy speculation that they did. Of course, the United States used 9/11 as a justification for the invasion of Iraq, even though there's like no relationship between those two things. It's just easy when you have a narrative to focus on as a country that you're the victim, therefore you get to kill millions of other people, whatever. Russia is at fault here. This is not the first time Russia has done this. They invaded Georgia. They seized Crimea. They have been destabilizing eastern Ukraine for a long time now. They have funded separatist movements, backed far-right and Russia-sympathetic candidates in a great many satellite countries. It is very, very obvious what they're doing. It is not ambiguous. There are people who are going to say that NATO's flirting with Ukraine is a prompt for Russian aggression, that we started this, that Ukraine promised that it would never move eastward after the end of the Cold War. This is a lie, okay? Did a little bit of reading on this. The idea that NATO promised never to expand was a lie from Gorbachev, who, after, I believe it was Hungary, the Czech Republic, and I forget the third country, joined NATO like 2 years after the Cold War. Gorbachev got salty and was like, oh, NATO lied. They said they wouldn't expand. Later, Gorbachev admitted that NATO never said any such thing. At the meeting during which Gorbachev claimed NATO promised not to expand, he said the subject of NATO expansion was never even brought up. Boris Yeltsin, the first Russian president, was not opposed to NATO expansion. Cautious about it, maybe, but he wasn't screaming about how it was a violation of any trust. This narrative that NATO has betrayed Russia, and is prompting Western aggression, that is big, an act of Western aggression, is one mainly, kept alive by Putin. Remember, the narrative of eternal victimhood is the signaling torch of the authoritarian government, okay? I swear to God, you can look at Nazi propaganda if you want to, and I hate to keep going back to that because Godwin's law, but I'm just pointing out that even the most aggressive, unjustified, rampantly authoritarian countries always play the victim. Take a look at their propaganda. They're always the victim. It's always, our country has been besieged by Jewish bankers. Our country is being, tormented by the nefarious, duplicitous French or whatever. You look at their propaganda, they never just do anything, Honest to God, massive pussies. They can never just do it. They can never just be like, yeah, I just want to invade Ukraine. Whatever, they always have to lie about it. If there are any people saying that, like, NATO's expansion, is prompting this, that this is our fault, you can slap them because they're wrong. NATO didn't promise not to expand. And what's more, can you really blame Ukraine for maybe wanting NATO protection when Russia is funding secessionist efforts in the east of the country and also invaded and conquered Crimea and also took Georgia? I mean, Russia has a history, both pre and post USSR, of rolling the tanks in when neighboring countries get a little bit too rowdy for their liking. Wanting NATO protection is kind of understandable, given that. It actually makes a lot of sense, Now, people are like, well, NATO is anti-Russian. Yeah, of course it is, obviously. Can you blame people for, like, calling in the anti-Russian guys when Russia is the thing that keeps threatening to invade? NATO isn't threatening to invade Ukraine. NATO will never invade Ukraine. They don't need to. NATO doesn't. First of all, NATO's not a country. Second of all, NATO just has no interest in invading Ukraine. That's just not a geopolitical thing that's happening. Russia, however, is about to invade Ukraine. Look, we can't stop what's coming. The war, I mean, there's nothing you or I can do unless you're Putin, in which case, Roblox yourself. I don't know. I don't know. It's worth a shot. Um, there's very little that we can do here, except for oppose narratives. Okay, that's pretty much our power here. So anybody who acts as though like Russia is acting defensively, slap them. They are wrong. They are justifying Russian imperialism. That's it. This is just plain and simple Russian imperialism. This is not a defensive maneuver. Ukraine was not threatening to invade Russia. There was no chance whatsoever of Russia's national autonomy being compromised by an invasion by Ukraine. It's imperialism. Simple as that. If they don't like NATO being at their doorstep, maybe they should stop being terrifying to the countries that are right next to them. You know, maybe if they don't, and by the way, okay, if countries neighboring the U.S., like say for example Cuba, were to like petition other geopolitical forces for help, you guys would not be like, oh well, this justifies U.S. aggression. Like the fact, for example, that Cuba has like better working relations with like anti-U.S. countries and former Soviet countries than it does the U.S. That wouldn't justify the U.S. invading Cuba. You realize that, right? This is like common imperialist, like the U.S. has invaded Cuba. Cuba turns to non-U.S. allies for assistance. That doesn't justify then like more invading. Like the imperialist logic. Okay, do not listen to the imperialist. Do not look at the imperialist. Do not eat the imperialist's food, for it is tainted with imperialism. Do not shake the imperialist's hand. Do not. Just don't. Okay. Do not spit at the imperialist, for you waste your saliva. Do not piss on the imperialist when they are on fire, for they deserve the burn. Just do not. Do not. Do not. Okay. We don't need to bother with this. I know all these fucking degenerate gray zone types are going to be screeching about U.S. imperialism, and there are probably going to be some of the more far-right Republicans, kind of like signaling or posturing support because authoritarians like authoritarians. But yeah, no, Russia's at fault here. In terms of how to best respond, my main concern at this point is, well, there are two things. East Ukraine, it seems to me, is lost. The territory of East Ukraine seems very indefensible. I'm not entirely sure how you could really fight that off. The region has already been ruined by, separatist movements that have been funded by Russia. West Ukraine might hold for a while longer, but Belarus has troops in it, so they could just cross the river and go, Just imagine your favorite 4X game. I mean, we got the surround. We got the surround, boys. I don't know how long Ukraine is going to last. I don't know if U.S. or NATO troops should involve themselves directly, because in order to fight off the Russians like effectively, it would involve a massive commitment of troops, and direct fighting between NATO or U.S. troops and Russian troops could lead literally to World War III. But I also don't think appeasement historically is a good strategy. There are arguments in favor of letting Russia like fight itself out with Ukraine while we supply Ukraine arms, and then it just like the empire starts to wither, the economy for Russia collapses, we strike them with every sanction on the book, they fall apart. Putin mysteriously disappears one day, and then like things go quiet. Like, I don't know. This stuff is really complicated. It relies on information that I don't have. I'm not a wizard. I'm sorry. If we fight directly and it leads to global nuclear war, then that's a bad outcome for everyone. So hopefully we don't get that, because I want to live. Stock up on beans now. Direct conflict between Russia and the U.S. is pretty scary for the same reason that it was, 50 years ago. So hopefully that's not how things go. Though the invasion seems near inevitable at this point. I don't know how many arms we can supply. Like, everything is going to fuel Russia's victim narrative. There's no getting around that. Like, no matter what happens, if we do nothing, if we do everything, if we fight, if we don't fight, if we supply arms, if we don't, no matter what, Russia is always going to be the victim from their perspective. Because that is always how imperialist countries justify their actions. They are always, always, always the ones under attack. And that's why they always, always, always have to be the ones to lash out. Okay? So anyone propelling the narrative, slap them. You know the drill, okay? We'll see how things play out. Honest to God, like by the time this go live, like they could already be moving troops like right now. I don't know. I don't have like a live feed in front of me. I'm just looking at the goddamn map here. So, sheesh. What were the other things I wanted to touch on? Look, when Russia invades, there the military mismatch is real. Okay, Ukraine doesn't stand a chance, at least not in the long run. East Ukraine is done. West Ukraine might hold off for a bit, but only a bit. Russia's military is vastly numerically superior. Technologically, I feel like with the arms being supplied to them, that might have evened out a little bit, but I still think Russia has a huge. I don't even know if it's comparable, really. I don't think Ukraine has a chance. But I mean, hey, Russia and the U.S. I mean, the USSR and the U.S. both lost in Afghanistan, so it's not as though asymmetrical, you know, conflict can't bear out in favor of the lesser sometimes. Uh, when Russia invades, there's going to be a deficit of information coming from Ukraine because Russia will make every possible effort to prevent Ukraine from sending out information, which means that when Russia inevitably does their war crimes, when civilians start getting killed, the rapes, the massacres, whatever. Nowadays, I mean, we have like cell phone video footage, right? They want to keep that from going out as much as possible. They'll try to darken the info, and Russia will control the narrative. And you're going to get Russia Today putting out hundreds of videos of Russian soldiers heroically rescuing Ukrainian citizens and, Ukrainian like militia forces sending bomb babies to blow up like, Russian convoys or whatever. Do not trust any information coming out of Russian state media. Do not trust any information which is a product of the deliberate media blackout that will be brought about in Ukraine. Just do not, okay? The default position here is Russia bad, and that is justified by them being the fucking invader, okay? If they didn't want that bias to be held against them, then they shouldn't have waged a decades-long propaganda campaign up to and leading to a conflict in which they will no doubt try to immediately silence the ability for their, for their victims to cry out to the world. I'm telling you, we're going to get a bombard of propaganda, both from Russia-aligned sources, and from people in the West who, for personal or political reasons, have a bias towards Russia and Russian propaganda. So that'll be really fun to deal with. I personally have no interest in listening to screeching, red-faced conspiracy theorists talk about how this latest, grainy video footage of an old Ukrainian woman thanking a Russian soldier and like kissing him on the cheek is an indication that Russian brotherhood and camaraderie extends across the border. Yeah, I don't care. Okay, I don't care. I do not care. Yeah, we'll see how things go. Hopefully we don't get in a nuclear war. Really, really rough stuff there. Yeah. It's okay to doom a bit over this. We'll see how things play out. Hopefully, cooler heads prevail. But at the end of the day, we can take some solace in the knowledge that if historical precedent is anything to go by, large decaying empires attempting to invade, highly mountainous and civilly charged, regions tends to go pretty well for them, or unwell. Sorry, I haven't had my shower yet. I'm quite tired. Also, honestly, not feeling good about this one, guys. I don't know. Not my top 2022 vibes. So we'll see. That one Twitter account who said that Russia was prompted to invade in winter, like early 2022. It's probably feeling pretty smart right now. I saw there were a bunch of people making fun of them back in like November when they made that big Twitter thread. But yeah, because just yesterday they were like, well, seems like everyone else is on board with me now. Like, all right, well, all right, you live your moment. Good luck out there. No doubt we'll talk about this more as the situation develops.